Welcome back. The Trump campaign is promising more legal action after filing suit in Michigan, Nevada, Georgia, Pennsylvania, arguing that Democrats are possibly rigging the vote count. The president last night reiterated what he had said was going to happen months ago.
Democrat officials never believed they could win this election honestly. I really believe that. That's why they did the mail-in ballots, where there's tremendous corruption and fraud going on.
But while the counting continues, both camps remain confident they will rise to victory.
We think we will win the election very easily. We think there's going to be a lot of litigation because we have so much evidence, so much proof, and it's going to end up perhaps at the highest court in the land.
We have no doubt that when the count is finished, Senator Harris and I will be declared the winners. So I ask everyone to stay calm, all the people to stay calm. The process is working. The count is being completed, and we'll know very soon.
Where are we in this process, and what are our prospects in it? With the latest, let's bring in our friend, CEO of American Majority, Ned Ryan. Ned, give it to me straight, man. How are we doing right now?
Well, I will say this. This is going to be a very interesting time for the Trump campaign. To put it mildly, I mean, this is shameful, though, what's taking place, Buck. I mean, this was completely avoidable. Most civilized countries, a lot of civilized countries, don't do universal mail-in ballots. France outlawed them in 1975 because they're rife with fraud. And yet here we have unelected public officials just decided by, their own decisions to insert universal mail-in ballots and cause the chaos. And I just want to remind people there were 300 lawsuits this year from the left, from Democrats, to get this to take place, to turn this into universal mail-in voting, to take election day, turn it into election weeks, to create this chaos. And so I'm making the argument, embrace the chaos. I think the Trump campaign should do all of the above. They're already litigating. They're already calling for recounts. So we know Georgia's going to be triggered into a recount just by law. They should leave nothing, no stone unturned. I will tell you this, Buck. There was an interesting interview today on another channel by Rod Blagojevich, the former governor of Illinois, in which he said, of course, there's fraud that's taking place. I came out of the Democratic machine in Chicago. It's a time-honored tradition in Democrat politics, whether it's Chicago, Detroit, Milwaukee, Philadelphia, Atlanta, for the machine to control the entire process by which votes are counted in these major urban areas. So I think it's incumbent upon the Trump campaign. And it's going to be very hard, Buck. I'm under no illusion that this is going to be easy to track, because I would remind people, as soon as ballots come in and separated from the envelope, they become anonymous. So, yeah, sure, they could prove that 30 or 40,000 dead people voted in Wisconsin or Philadelphia, but how are you going to know which votes are actually invalid or not? And so I think it's a tough hill for the Trump campaign to climb, but they have to do it, because I think Trump has to look at the American people and tell them this isn't about me. This is about making sure that we have free and fair elections where all legal votes are counted in a trustworthy and transparent way, so that you can actually trust the system. You can start to trust institutions, because my fear is no matter how this actually turns out in the end, Buck, half the American people are going to go, we think you stole the election. We don't think this is legitimate. Therefore, we don't accept anything that you will attempt to implement over the next 2 to 4 years.
Ned, there's this narrative out there that you get from Democrats right now, although in general, they will make blanket statements, and I could cite people by name, but I don't want to waste your time, who will say there's no such thing as voter fraud. And then people like me and you will do, of course there is. We'll do a Google search and say, well, there's a guy last week who went to prison for it in the district we're talking about. Or there's a guy, a month ago. If it happens with some frequency, and that's just what's caught. I always like to tell people it's a little bit like tax fraud. Some people get in trouble for it. A whole lot more people are doing it, as we all know. It's just a question of who's actually going to get in trouble for it in the first place. But, we had a guy in Philadelphia, there's a federal indictment where somebody was and he explained, because he ended up taking a guilty plea because they had him nailed. It was in Philadelphia. He was working for political consultants, and he just, and had people that he was working with at the polling places who, the moment they thought the coast was clear, they looked at the list of people registered and started filling out ballots on their behalf and just running up the scoreboard as fast as possible. It's actually pretty hard to catch that. So why do we keep getting told there's no fraud when that's actually a lie? That's not true.
It is a lie. And I think the thing, though, that's going to be hard, as we know, is for the Trump campaign to actually prove enough on a scale that's big enough to say, actually, the vote fraud that took place might have been 30, 40, 50,000 votes that exceeds the margin of victory in this state. Therefore, we actually are going to litigate this, and the courts have to look at it at that point. That's the burden of proof, and it's a shame because I really do feel like it's completely flipped the burden of proof onto the Trump campaign and saying, well, you actually have to prove it, and if you can't prove it, well, then it doesn't exist. We know it exists. I mean, there are a lot of anomalies that took place on election night where it just doesn't pass the smell test. I mean, how does Joe Biden, who hung out in his basement half the time, exceed Obama's high mark in votes by over 4 million votes? How does a supposed blue wave turn into something where Republicans are probably going to pick up 10 to 15 seats in the House? Hopefully, and I have to tell people, we got to be careful we keep the Senate because these two elections, Senate elections in Georgia, are causing me some real angst because of what's taking place in Fulton County. So don't sleep on it and say that we somehow kept the majority in the Senate, because if we don't, it's game on for whatever they can pull off if Joe Biden eventually wins it.
Tell folks listening right now, Ned, this is really important because one thing that made me feel like, look, I want Trump to fight for every inch and whatever I can do to help the campaign get the word out about the need to see this process through and bring the legal challenges. I'm all on board for that, right? I'm saying hop into the trench and let's see how we do. Just because you hop in the trench doesn't mean you win, as history shows us. But
That's right.
When you look at the Senate, that was a little bit of a, keeping people calm in the background. Okay, it's not going to be that bad. What do you mean we're not necessarily going to keep the Senate? I know about these Georgia races, but I want you to tell people about the runoffs, what's happening.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, with Purdue not making the 50.0 mark in Georgia, it's being forced into a runoff. And obviously, Kelly Loeffler's race is now into a runoff. I think it's January 5th for both of them. And this is where it's going to come down to. If they don't win, if Republicans don't keep both of those seats, I think it becomes a 50-50 tie in the Senate. And if Joe Biden wins, God forbid, Kamala Harris then becomes the deciding vote. And I was the same way, Buck, on election night. I woke up the next day and said to my wife, at least we kept the Senate. We can stop the massive stupidity, whether it's court packing, whether it's adding statehood for D.C. and Puerto Rico, removing the legislative filibuster, all of these things that would be devastating and lead to one-party rule. At least we have the Senate and can put a stop to the madness. And then yesterday, watching the votes come in from Georgia, especially in Fulton County, really started to get a very uneasy sensation that almost feels like, and I have to tell you this, Buck, Georgia, Biden really doesn't need Georgia to win. It almost feels like a dry run for the January 5th special elections to see what they can actually get away with. Because I'm telling you, this will be an absolute dogfight like we've never seen for these two Senate races because of the implications of what it would actually look like for the next 4 years. We either can put a stop to the madness with a Senate, or they're going to get everything they want.
What
all
are
the
some
crazy far left ideas?
Without any check on a Biden administration and Democrat majority, then I actually turn into one of these people who is straight up worried about the future of the country, right? With the Senate in Republican hands, I tell everybody, get ready for the fight ahead. We're going to be all right. We're still going to fight, but we're taking heavy incoming if they have the House and the Senate and the presidency, which I can't believe we're even at that point. We have to talk about it, but we do. But Ned, what did you see in Georgia, if anything, that in this process at this stage that's raised some alarm? I know there was the water main break, but what else has gone on there? Which they're saying, this stuff happens, right? Okay, well, but what else happened?
Right. How convenient. This has happened in all the major urban areas that were obviously key battleground states for not only Trump, but key Senate races. Hey, let's just stop counting votes, and then all of a sudden 4 a.m. new votes show up that somehow heavily favor Joe Biden. I mean, there's a process in place, as Blagojevich pointed out. It's just a whole process that something's there. This process is in place, and it's really suspicious when, coming out of Philadelphia, just talk about Philadelphia, when you have, 23,277 votes that all went for the last vote to Joe Biden. Come on, people. If you're going to do that, at least give maybe 10% of the votes to Trump. Don't be so obvious. But that's what worries me about Georgia, that they have put in place a system that unless Republicans, Mitch McConnell had better dig in on Georgia. He better invest a lot of time and money starting this week in going down and saying, we are going to examine this process by which votes are coming in, and we're not going to let it happen for these special elections in January for these two very key Senate races.
Yeah, I think Mitt Romney in 2012, there were, 95 districts in Philadelphia where he got 0 votes. 0% of the vote. We're supposed to believe that.
At what point do the American people say we've had enough? Right? Do they say we're not going to put up with this anymore? We have to get back to being able to trust our institutions. And I have to tell you, there's always been question marks, right? There have always been question marks about, hey, that looks really suspicious. We've been able to manage during the national elections with some of these major urban areas and battleground states. But this is like nothing we've ever seen. At what point do the American people say, we've got to get back to trusting this? We want more transparency. Why are you cardboarding over windows? Why are you keeping observers 100 feet away? Why are votes showing up in the middle of the night? There's a lot of cause for suspicion about what's taking place. We deserve answers. And I think that's the thing that Trump has to do. And I want him to look at a camera, Buck. I want him to look straight into the camera and say, I am going to do everything I can to win. But if it's the last thing I do as the president of the United States, I believe I owe it to the American people to get us back to being able to trust the electoral process. I will do everything in my power to be able to do that. And if at the end of the day, every legal vote is counted in a trustworthy and transparent way, and I lose, I am more than happy to leave and go back to making obscene amounts of money. God bless you. Go in peace.
Ned Ryan, everybody. Ned, have a good weekend. Back in the fight next week.
Thanks, Buck.